Let us help your parents see, hey, you wouldn't loan your car out to these teachers. You probably wouldn't loan out your Camry or your Hyundai or your Mercedes or whatever, but you're loaning your kids to them. Consider here the value of helping offset what's going on when it's only, $75 for a button or a piece. I don't think it's that expensive.
Welcome to the BJU Press Teacher Edition podcast, where Christian educators are encouraged and inspired as we bring you interviews, practical ideas, strategies, and answer your questions about teaching in today's culture. And here's your host, Jenny Copeland.
Welcome back, everyone. Jim Boyte is back with us, and we are going to continue our conversation about empowering everyone to be part of school safety. In part one, we talked about how to mix up drills in a way that breaks them away from the mundane, those physical drills that most schools hold, which is fine. It's great. But how can we break that up? Jim gave us some practical advice as well as presented several tools that could be used. And these are simple tools that can be used immediately. As we get started today, let me again remind you to visit our website, teachereditionpodcast.com, as well as visit us on social media, Teacher Edition Pod on Instagram and TikTok, and Teacher Edition Podcast on Facebook. Of course, you can also find us on YouTube as well. Okay, let's get back into this discussion on school safety. Jim, thanks again for being with us for this episode.
Thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
Okay, so let's shift gears just a bit. We've been talking about some drill strategies and tools that can be used. Recently, I learned more about the wearable panic buttons that you and your team have introduced. We know in a crisis, timing is everything. And as you've said already in part one over and over, having something that connects you to that information. So in this case, having a device that connects to instant access, that just sounds really practical. So tell us more about how these devices work and why you feel they're so valuable for Christian schools.
We do. Miss Jenny, we've had the panic buttons that can be digital, the ones that can go under the desk. But just recently at CES in 2025, we won a few awards and released our wearable panic buttons. And they are a means of instant communication without even having to get back to your computer, or maybe you can't get back to the under the desk piece or the button, wherever the case is. These are a panic button that we have. I think there's some other companies that have some similar things. Ours work in conjunction with Active Defender, but literally, this is not really for sales that way, but for Christian schools, which is different. So pay attention to our website. Just skip that. For like under $500 for a setup fee, a front desk person. Okay, just think the person right there at the front that's most likely to see something coming in could either have you double click it, and it means, hey, just come help me. I need help up here. Don't lock down the whole school. Or if they press and hold it for a second and a half, not only does the SRO, the principal, the assistant principal, every smartboard, Chromebook, Mac, PC, and phone of those teachers, let them know the person at the front desk put the school in lockdown, but it also comes right across the 911 screen at their 911 center. Wow. So the school administrator doesn't have to do anything. We're like, the timing is like less than 5 seconds for everything to happen. But it's not just that the 911 center gets the information. It's that their friend teaching third grade down the hall also gets an alert on their smartboard or on their phone, or even if they were driving into the school, their phone goes off like a presidential alert and says, hey, you need to know what your receptionist is saying. So that's sort of the overview of why we're passionate about it.
Yeah, excellent. So talk more about, we mentioned a little bit about administrators. You talked a little bit about front desk. Those are often our frontline people in a crisis. Talk more about how this could help them in their roles, in their situations.
Sure. Okay. So this we cannot give for free. Okay. But sure, we provide, even if you cannot afford it, any school that is unashamed to say, I am a Christian school. We won't even get into doctrine. There's a lot of variations of it. We work a lot with AACS and ACSI schools, both in particular, because my doctrine aligns with that. But any school that unashamedly says, hey, I want to not only give these kids a good education, but a Christ-centered worldview, we think it is so valuable to at least have a digital panic button that we offer every school in America, every church in America, completely free of charge, zero charge, a digital panic button. Now, this won't go to the 911 center because that gets expensive, but a digital panic button that will connect with their principal, their assistant principal, their school resource officer, so that they can, and it's a silent alarm. They just click it once and it sends a silent alarm to those folks. You have to have communication. The worst thing in the world is that person may not be able to get on a walkie-talkie or keep talking. So they need to be in touch with somebody that can help relay that information.
Right.
And we think that is so important that as a company, totally free from us.
That's amazing.
And many AACS schools, matter of fact, do you know Dr. Walton out of Chattanooga?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
he's actually been on the show.
Okay. He sent out a letter for us we probably have a 20, 30% of the AACS schools as our customers, but we were so passionate about it. This shouldn't be an infomercial about us, but just to know people can get the free stuff from us with no obligation, no strings attached. You have to have some sort of button that you can press, at least a digital, even if it's not a physical one, that can alert somebody, because you may only have 3-4 seconds to make that decision to get somebody to come and help.
Absolutely. Okay, so you gave us an introduction to those buttons, especially for admins and front desk personnel. What about teachers and other staff? What's the importance with them having this as well?
We think it's very important. It has a caveat to it, especially with a teacher, though. Okay, we would like to see every teacher at every school have a wearable panic button. We think it is phenomenal as long as there's the proper training to go with it. Without it. So how many teachers do you know whose name happens to be Shadrach, Meshach, or Abednego? Have you met any teachers?
No,
and maybe
that's
some.
Kind of limited. Yeah.
Okay. When you were an administrator, were any of your teachers named Shadrach, Meshach, or Abednego?
No, I'm not recalling any.
Okay. Well, if any of those three, we would allow them to have a panic button because they might be in the middle of the fire and press it. But though the fourth man in the fire be with you, we do not want you to use a panic button when you're looking out your window. Imagine you had a teacher on the second floor and they looked out their window and they saw in the parking lot an old Ford Pinto. Now, most of your administrators might know, but some of them might be old enough to know that was a car that if it got hit in the back end could catch on fire. They looked out in the parking lot. There was a car on fire out there, or it could be an active shooter out there. But they see the problem. If you study school emergencies, there's a whole part of the Secret Service out of Pennsylvania that studies student suicide, school shootings, behavioral analysis in schools devoted to it. Sometimes we think Secret Service only protects the president. They do a whole lot more than that. And by the way, just so your folks go, you should have one of them on here. Do you know they will go to your schools? I learned this with Barron Nobles down in Wilmington. We went down there. Barron had the Secret Service come in and do a whole presentation. Since then, we've had them follow us at our shows across the country.
That's fantastic.
Let me get back there. They look out the window. They see a problem. Do you want them to press a button digitally or physically and say the problem's in room 217 upstairs and people downstairs run right into it?
Correct.
So if the problem is in your face, if the problem is right there, if you're double clicking because a kid brought a snake in a mason jar to school and he's still alive and the jar dropped and the snake's slithering, you don't want to lock down the school, but you definitely want to double click. I need some help right now.
Yeah, definitely a difference.
I think every teacher could think of times, gosh, if I could have just instantly double clicked a button and people were going to come help me.
Right.
It would make a difference. but the training needs to be with all the other mental training we were talking about.
Right.
There was a school shooting in Georgia a few months ago. Multiple people, they didn't use our button. It was another company. Multiple people pressed the button at the same time, and it said the shooter was in 8 different locations. They didn't have any other means to communicate. That's all they had.
Right.
So we're like, hey, we want to give you the button, but we also want to give you the ability that on your smart board or Chromebook or your phone or your tablet, you can say, I see the danger at this location in ours. So I may have gone overboard. Let me stop and let you ask questions.
No. That's great. Okay. So I'm pretty confident that as you're talking about all these amazing things, some listeners are just waiting for that little cash register soundbite to queue up. So how can Christian schools who typically operate on a really tight budget bring these types of resources to their schools? You've given a few hints to that, but what's your advice on that?
I'll keep my prices way down. Listen, let me talk to the administrators. See me, administrators, pay your teachers more if you can, if at all possible. Let me go out and even invite me in to talk to your parents at your PTA meeting and help get the money. Jenny, we will give the digital panic buttons free and the setup and the training, no cost. It's going to take the administrator's time we will only give it if they check a box and promise to use it during every drill each month. Now, whether you pay for it or you get it free, if you don't use it in your drills, we're like, you're not going to be a good customer for us.
Right.
But if you do, then you will. But even the physical buttons, these are only $75 if you're a Christian school.
Wow. Definitely worth the investment.
They're $75. If you can so we're like, literally our cost to connect you to the 911 center is $400 a year. So we're like, hey, for $500, we'll send you the button, and it has to have a little hub. I thought I had one right here. I was looking. I don't. It's a tiny little thing. It just plugs in through power over Ethernet. I don't know if that means anything to you, but it just is a cat cable. It plugs in near there. But for $500, we will connect you to the 911 center and your front desk, and $75. And then if you want to add another teacher, another administrator, another thing like that, I don't think they're that cost effective. And I promise you that if they got one of our team, we're real people in a little town called Carthage, North Carolina. Get us on a Zoom call with your parents and let us help your parents see, hey, you wouldn't loan your car out to these teachers. You probably wouldn't loan out your Camry or your Hyundai or your Mercedes or whatever, but you're loaning your kids to them.
Right. Absolutely.
And consider here the value of helping offset what's going on when it's only, $75 for a button or a piece. I don't think it's that expensive. And truthfully, I don't know that I want to say this on the show. I may ask you to go back and cut it out. I do not want a school administrator coming and poor mouthing me. I know they can. And some of them are professionals at it. And I don't mean that in a bad way. But if you genuinely can't, and you and your pastor come to me and say, hey, Jim, we really want this. We might be able to pay for it next year. We can't afford to pay for it this year. We will give it to you. And not because we are so rich, but that's how committed we are, that God says, by the love of the brethren, you're known.
Yeah. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, Jim is passionate about this, and you can see that coming through right here in his heart. Jim, these are excellent tools. These get us thinking, but they also get us planning about how we as admins and teachers can link arms and best prepare ourselves. Should a crisis occur? They're not planned. We don't know. We have to do our preparation ahead of the time. Now, you mentioned a number of resources. In addition to Active Defender, which we didn't talk about in depth today, which is fine because listeners can read about that. If a listener is interested in their school taking the next step and genuinely want to improve their school safety, what would you say is the best way for them to get started?
If you don't want to get it from us, still doesn't cost you that. Google tabletop exercises. Make your own. We got about 89 of them. We will give them to you, but only one at a time, because we want to know you use the last one. I'm not interested in people stockpiling. If you want, the stop and think drills, we've got enough for you to do one every 2 weeks. We recommend every 3 weeks, but we'll get. Then there's the flip side. Most schools, and we would want you to do a tabletop exercise on it to learn about it. Have you thought about reunification? I pray you would never have to do it. The most likely time that you have to do reunification, and I hope that's not a foreign term to somebody, but it's about, hey, I've got to get these kids back to their parents, but it's under unusual circumstances, and I have to verify that they're all accounted for. Okay.
Right.
The most likely time, Miss Jenny, that will take place is if a visiting team comes to your school and something bad happens, like a sexual assault, and you cannot let them leave until the police come in and interview people with their parents. And so it's like getting the kid to the parents to the interview, because you've got a crime scene on your hands. And we're like, how are you going to handle that? Because 300 or 400 index cards can be a nightmare, but it might be the only way you have. So do you do reunification? Let me go back one step before that. When you do a fire drill, in any emergency, I would encourage one of the things, and a great resource would be to realize the two big problems in any emergency is there's not enough information or there's too much information.
Right.
And every school we see generally has certain things in both categories. Okay. And the too much information is this. I tell people I think I could be a third grade teacher. Not that I've been certified or anything like that. I'm not suited to be anything more than that. But I'm more, my favorite aunt was a third grade teacher. But I'm like, hey, if I was your third grade teacher and I had 19 kids in my class, but during this emergency, I have eyeballs. We call it the eyeball number. I have eyeballs on 18 kids. Do you really need me to take the bandwidth to download a class roll, check the names of the 18, and send it back to you? Or could I just tell you, I have 18 of my 19, but here's the one name of the kid I should have that I don't have.
Right.
Here's where it's missing on the other side of too little. Does your system allow a teacher that has an extra kid a way to report, I've got little Johnny that Jim's missing? I would encourage teachers, administrators, to talk it over themselves. How can we make it so that I can not have too much superfluous information and just say, this is who I'm missing, and also this is who I've got extra, and check it against the roll? Just on their own, even without any tabletops, even without any stop and think drills, but think through, if I had to do a reunification, if I had to do, and you have to do these fire drills and account for my kids, how could I do it efficiently? And one more, make sure your school's lawyers have helped you with knowing what do I have that's already prepared if I have to make a statement, but I don't have time to run it back through them.
Yes.
And you've probably already done that. I know the school you were formerly at, and they were really good on top of those things. But we work with a lot of schools and they may be fairly large schools, but have never thought about.
Right.
And so
Just
I would hey.
Hope you don't need them doesn't mean you don't need to do them.
We want to provide tools that they can communicate. We have a behavioral analysis tool. We're like, we think it's probably the only digital. We worked with 18 months with the Secret Service to develop a behavioral analysis, because teen suicides are off the chart since COVID. They are exponentially increased. But I would encourage every administrator, even if you don't have active defender, you don't have anything, do you have a system in place at your teachers' meeting? And once again, I can give you a tabletop exercise so that if your homeroom teacher said, hey, I got little Tom Brady's. You know who Tom Brady is? He was this kind of football player, retired now.
Yes.
Yeah. But I got this little Tom Brady. He's real preppy, but he's kind of an introvert. You know what I mean? He's really smart, great athlete. And I got these little Dak Prescotts. That's another guy out there. He's, disheveled hair and a big grin, straight A student. Everybody kind of like totally different people. But your teachers know when they're not who they normally are.
Right.
Are you, as the administrator and their teachers, on a weekly or biweekly basis talking about the difference in those kids? Because the Secret Service says if one of your kids commits suicide, almost always, it is rare that there weren't at least 3 markers but they were always so small. I noticed their clothing just wasn't, they weren't participating anymore. Their writing looked a little dark. The cafeteria work, I noticed they really weren't eating. They would pick at their food. God allows people to see things, but they're like so small. Right. I don't need to report them for that. This is not something you report a kid for. I would beg you to help your administrators find a system that you are talking about kids that have change in their life because you love these kids. You're not profiling them. You love them.
Right.
And those parents have trusted you with something more valuable than their phone, that they wouldn't loan you their phone. They wouldn't loan you their car, but they're loaning you your kids for a few hours.
That's so true. And as we say so often on the show, school is not just about checking off those lesson boxes. It's not just about the academics. There's so much more, and school safety is right in there. Jim, you have been so helpful. So as we sign off, I wondered if you have one piece of advice that you want to leave with listeners, just something quick, one piece of advice they can walk away with today.
I think the battle is won and lost in prayer. Pray for your school, pray for your pastor, pray for your leaders for vision that say, come quickly, Lord Jesus. But in everything, I want to see our Lord and Savior who died for us and rose again. And I want to encourage teachers to pray out loud in front of your kids that together we know God is going to get us through everything. And the most important tool we have is to know we can cast all our cares upon Him. And that's just my heart about making much of Jesus in everything we do, Miss Jenny.
Excellent. Jim, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your willingness to share, but also thank you for your tireless work to equip Christian schools with the tools that they need every day. It's really been a blessing to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. It's my honor. God bless you. I pray God blesses you and everyone.
Thank you. And to those who are listening and watching, thank you for joining us today. I hope you are really challenged by what you heard today. Remember to go to teachereditionpodcast.com to submit questions for upcoming episodes. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and go follow us on social media. Now, it's time to get back to your day. But again, it's not just any day, because every day in the classroom is your day to impact and inspire through God's power and through His grace working in you. Go do what God has called you to do.